The world had been watching Ukraine with growing concern. War had changed everything. Cities that were once full of life were now covered in smoke and dust. Streets that once echoed with laughter now carried the sounds of sirens and distant explosions. But in the middle of all this chaos, one man stood firm: President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He refused to leave his country, even when powerful enemies targeted him. His bravery inspired millions, but it also made him a top target. Intelligence agencies across the world had been tracking threats against Zelenskyy. There were whispers in secret meetings, intercepted messages, and suspicious movements in the shadows. Every day, new threats emerged. Some came from professional assassins, others from dangerous groups wanting to remove him. Ukrainian security forces were doing everything possible to protect their leader, but they needed help. Across the sea, in the United Kingdom, a special team was called into action. The British government knew the situation was serious. If anything happened to Zelenskyy, it could change the course of history. That's why they decided to send one of their most elite units, the Counter-Terrorist Specialist Firearms Officers, known as CTSFOs. These were not ordinary officers. They were the best of the best, trained to handle the most dangerous situations in the world. Each member of this team had spent years mastering advanced combat skills, counterterrorism tactics, and high-risk protection missions. They had faced armed criminals, dangerous terrorists, and life-threatening situations before, but this mission was different. Protecting a president in an active war zone was not just about skill. It was about making the right decisions in seconds, staying alert at all times, and being ready to risk everything. As the CTSFO team prepared for their mission, they studied every detail. They analyzed the threats, mapped out possible attack locations, and worked on emergency escape plans. They also trained with Ukrainian security forces, ensuring that everyone knew their roles in case of an attack. It was not just about fighting back. It was about making sure Zelenskyy stayed alive, no matter what happened. The team arrived in Kiev under complete secrecy. No one outside the highest level of security knew about their presence. They blended into the background, dressed in simple tactical gear, avoiding attention. Their eyes scanned every rooftop, every window, and every crowd. They had to think like those planning an attack, predicting their moves before they even happened. Tension filled the air. The city was always at risk, but this time, something felt different. There were rumors of a new plot, a planned attack that could happen any time. The enemy was watching, waiting for the perfect moment. But what they didn't know was that the CTSFO team was already watching them, ready to act. Would their training and preparation be enough? Could they stop the danger before it was too late? One thing was certain: this was going to be a mission like no other. The team of Counter-Terrorist Specialist Firearms Officers, CTSFOs, had arrived in Kiev, but their mission was far from easy. The moment they set foot in the city, they knew they had entered a danger zone. Every street, every building, and every shadow held the possibility of an attack. They had been in dangerous situations before, but this time, the stakes were even higher. They were not just protecting a high-profile leader. They were guarding the symbol of Ukraine's resistance. The officers worked quickly, setting up their strategy. Their first task was to coordinate with the Ukrainian security forces who had been protecting President Zelenskyy since the start of the conflict. These men had already seen multiple threats, survived near attacks, and remained loyal despite the risks. But now, with the intelligence of a new assassination plot, they needed reinforcement. The British officers had experience in dealing with highly trained attackers, and their skills would help strengthen the security around the president. The team studied every detail of Zelenskyy's movements. His meetings, his speeches, and even his short appearances in public were all carefully examined. They had to think like the enemy. If someone was planning an attack, where would they strike? Would they use snipers from a rooftop? Would they try to get close by disguising themselves as security personnel? Or would they create a distraction to draw the guards away? These were the questions the CTSFO officers had to answer before it was too late. Their instincts told them that the biggest risk would come during an upcoming diplomatic meeting. Zelenskyy was scheduled to meet foreign officials in a secure location, but even secure did not mean safe. Intelligence reports suggested that hostile forces had already gathered information about the event. There were whispers of trained operatives blending into the city, waiting for the right moment. The officers immediately went to work. They inspected the venue, checking every possible entry and exit point. They scanned rooftops for any signs of snipers. Every security checkpoint was strengthened, and multiple backup plans were put in place. If something went wrong, they needed a quick way to get the president out safely. But there was one more problem. Zelenskyy himself. He was not the kind of leader to hide in a bunker. He believed in standing with his people, walking among them, and showing the world that he was not afraid. While this made him a powerful leader, it also made his protection much harder. He refused to wear heavy armor or stay behind thick bulletproof glass. The CTSFO officers respected his courage, but they knew their job was to ensure he survived. As the day of the meeting approached, the tension grew. Every officer remained on high alert. They had planned for every possibility. But in a real-life situation, things could change in an instant. The enemy was smart, unpredictable, and determined. Would their preparation be enough? Or would the enemy find a way to break through? The team knew one thing for sure. When the moment came, they had to be ready to fight back. The city of Kyiv was quieter than usual, but the silence did not bring peace. It was the kind of silence that made people uneasy, as if something dangerous was about to happen. The officers of the CTSFO team could feel it too. They had been in high-risk missions before, and their instincts told them that an attack was near. The intelligence reports had been clear. Someone was planning to harm President Zelenskyy, and they were running out of time to stop it. The officers worked day and night, searching for any clue that could lead them to the attackers. They knew that these enemies were not ordinary criminals. They were highly trained and had studied the president's movements carefully. They had likely found weak points in security, places where they could strike when no one expected it. This meant the CTSFO team had to be even smarter, staying one step ahead at all times. As they monitored different locations, their suspicions grew stronger about the upcoming diplomatic meeting. This event was important, and many foreign officials would be attending. That meant increased security, but it also meant more chances for an attacker to blend in. Someone disguised as a guard, a journalist, or even a staff member could try to get close to Zelenskyy, and if they succeeded, the consequences would be disastrous. The officers increased surveillance. They studied security camera footage and watched the movements of everyone around the venue. They also worked with Ukrainian intelligence officers to track suspicious individuals. One by one, they eliminated possible threats, but something still felt off. It was as if the real enemy was hiding just out of sight, waiting for the right moment. Then, just a day before the event, they found something alarming. A small group of unknown men had been spotted near the meeting venue. They had no official IDs, no clear reason to be there, and they avoided security cameras. When officers tried to approach them, they quickly disappeared into the crowded streets. It was a clear sign. Someone was planning something big. The CTSFO team immediately reported the information to higher authorities. Security was tightened even further. Extra guards were placed at every entrance, and hidden officers were stationed throughout the venue. Every guest and staff member would be checked multiple times. Despite these precautions, the CTSFO officers knew that danger was still present. The attackers had already shown that they were smart and careful. They would not give up so easily. If they were still planning to strike, they would find a way to do it. As the sun set over Kyiv, the officers prepared for a long and difficult night. Their weapons were loaded, their communication lines were clear, and their eyes remained sharp. They had been sent here for one reason: to keep President Zelenskyy safe. No matter what happened, They would not fail their mission. But the real test was just about to begin. The day of the important diplomatic meeting had finally arrived. Kyiv was tense, but the city continued to function as best as it could. People were used to living under the shadow of uncertainty, but today felt different. Security was tighter than ever before. Roads leading to the meeting venue were blocked, and every car that approached was carefully inspected. Armed officers stood at key points, watching every movement with sharp eyes. Inside the venue, the CTSFO officers moved quickly, checking every last detail. Every room had been inspected multiple times, every window secured, and every staff member carefully screened. Despite their efforts, a strange feeling of unease lingered in the air. It was impossible to shake off the thought that something could still go wrong. The attackers had planned this for a long time. They would not back down so easily. President Zelenskyy was preparing for his speech. He was calm, focused, and ready to address the gathered officials. The world was watching, and he knew his words mattered. But the CTSFO team was not thinking about speeches. Their only focus was keeping him safe. The guests started arriving. Diplomats, military officials, and security personnel filled the hall. The CTSFO officers were positioned in key locations. Some were near the president, some blended into the crowd, and others watched from high vantage points. Every movement was monitored. If an attacker was among the crowd, they would have to act fast to stop them. Then something unusual happened. One of the officers noticed a man acting strangely near the entrance. He was wearing an official badge, but something about him seemed off. He avoided eye contact, kept adjusting his jacket, and appeared nervous. The officer quietly signaled his team, and within seconds, 2 officers moved toward the man. "Excuse me, sir, can we see your identification again?" one of them asked. The man hesitated for a moment before reaching into his pocket. But before he could pull anything out, the officers acted. They grabbed his arms and secured him instantly. A quick search revealed what they feared. He was carrying unauthorized equipment. The man was immediately taken away for questioning. This was a warning sign. If one suspect had managed to get this close, there could be others. The CTSO team knew that this might not be the main attack. It could be a distraction. They increased their vigilance, scanning the room for anything unusual. As President Zelenskyy stepped onto the stage to begin his speech, the officers' hands tightened on their equipment. Every second mattered now. The enemy was watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Would they make their move now, or was the real danger still ahead? The officers knew they had to be ready for anything. One wrong move, one missed detail, and the mission could end in disaster. The tension in the room was unbearable. The real test was about to begin. The large hall was silent as President Zelenskyy walked onto the stage. Cameras flashed, and the sound of clicking shutters filled the air. World leaders, diplomats, and military officials sat in their seats, waiting for his speech. Outside, security forces stood alert, their eyes scanning every corner. But inside the hall, the real battle had already begun. The CTSFO officers remained in their positions, carefully watching the crowd. The earlier incident with the suspicious man had proven one thing. The enemy was already inside. They just didn't know how many there were or when they would strike. Every movement, every glance, and every hand reaching into a pocket made the officers' hearts race. They had trained for moments like this, but training could never match the reality of being in the middle of a real-life threat. Zelenskyy adjusted the microphone and began to speak. His voice was steady, full of determination. He spoke about the strength of his people, the importance of unity, and the need for international support. The audience listened carefully, nodding in agreement. But the officers weren't listening to the words. They were listening to the room itself. Footsteps, whispers, rustling fabric, anything that seemed out of place. Then one of the officers spotted something unusual. Near the side entrance, a man was slowly making his way toward the front rows. He wasn't walking normally. He was moving carefully, as if trying not to be noticed. His hands were hidden under his jacket, and his eyes were locked on the president. The officer didn't hesitate. He quickly signaled 2 other team members and moved in. The man saw them approaching and suddenly turned, trying to walk away. But it was too late. Within seconds, the officers had surrounded him. "Stop right there," one of them said firmly. The man froze. His hands were still under his jacket. One wrong move, and things could turn deadly. "Slowly show us your hands," another officer commanded. The man hesitated, then finally lifted his hands. The officers immediately searched him and found something alarming: an unauthorized device hidden inside his jacket. It wasn't a weapon, but it was suspicious enough to confirm that he was part of the threat. The officers quickly took him into custody, but they knew this was far from over. Was he acting alone, or were there more attackers waiting for the perfect moment? Meanwhile, Zelenskyy continued his speech, unaware of the tension unfolding just a few meters away. The officers knew they couldn't afford to let their guard down. The attack could still happen at any moment. Then one of the snipers positioned on the upper level noticed something alarming: movement on a nearby rooftop. Someone was up there, watching through a scope. Was it a sniper? Was this the real attack? The officers had no time to think. High above the meeting hall, on a rooftop across the street, a shadowy figure adjusted a scope. The CTSO sniper, positioned on an upper balcony, had been scanning the surrounding buildings when he noticed the movement. His heart pounded as he focused his sights on the unknown person. The figure was holding something: a rifle, a camera, or something else. He had only seconds to decide. Without hesitation, the sniper radioed his team. "We have a possible threat on the rooftop, northeast side. Moving into position." The response came immediately. "Copy that. Stay on him. Ground team, prepare to secure the area." Inside the hall, the other officers remained alert. 2 officers slipped outside through a side exit, moving quickly toward the building where the suspicious figure had been spotted. Every second mattered. If this was an attacker, they had to stop him before he had the chance to act. Meanwhile, President Zelenskyy, the sniper, had been caught, but the CTSFO officers knew their job wasn't over yet. Experience had taught them that threats often came in layers. One attack could be a distraction for something bigger. The team couldn't afford to relax. They stayed in position, watching every corner of the hall, every person in the crowd, and every possible point of danger. President Zelenskyy continued his speech, unaware of the full extent of the danger that had just been prevented. His words were strong, carrying a message of unity and resilience. The audience was captivated, nodding in agreement. But the officers were not focused on the speech. They were focused on the unknown. Then, a sharp-eyed officer noticed something unusual. Near the back of the hall, a man had just stepped out of his seat and was moving toward a restricted area. He wore an official badge, but something about him seemed off. His steps were quick but controlled, as if he was trying to stay unnoticed. One officer signaled to another, and within seconds, they moved toward him. "Sir, this area is restricted," one officer said, stepping in his path. The man hesitated, his hand slipping into his jacket. The officers immediately reacted, grabbing his arms before he could reach for anything. The hall, still filled with people, remained unaware of the silent struggle happening in the back. "Check him," the officer ordered. Another officer quickly searched the man and discovered a small device hidden inside his pocket. It was not a weapon, but it was suspicious enough to raise alarms. The officers acted fast, removing him from the area and alerting security. The device was immediately examined, and within moments, the shocking truth was revealed. It was a signal jammer. The realization sent a wave of urgency through the team. If someone had been trying to block communication, it could only mean one thing: there was still another part of the attack that had not been stopped. The officers scanned the room again, their senses sharper than ever. Was there another attacker? Had someone slipped past security? They didn't have time to question. They had to act now. Then, through his earpiece, one of the officers heard a chilling message from the technical team monitoring security cameras outside. "We have movement near the convoy. Multiple unidentified individuals approaching the vehicles." The convoy was President Zelenskyy's only planned escape route. If an attack was coming, it was going to happen there. The officers didn't hesitate. Some stayed inside to protect the president, while others rushed outside toward the convoy. The enemy was making their final move, and the team had to stop them, no matter what. The battle wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The tension had reached its peak. The CTSFO officers inside the hall remained near President Zelenskyy, ensuring his safety, while the rest of the team rushed toward the convoy. The enemy had made their final move, and now everything depended on stopping them before it was too late. Outside, the night air was cold, but the officers barely noticed. Their focus was locked on the unidentified individuals near the convoy. Through their earpieces, they received constant updates from the surveillance team. 3 unknowns spotted near the rear vehicle, another 2 moving from the side. No clear weapons visible yet. The officers moved in quickly, their steps silent but firm. They didn't want to start a panic, but they were ready for anything. As they approached the suspicious individuals, one of the men suddenly turned, his eyes meeting an officer's for a split second. And then, it happened. The suspects bolted in different directions, trying to escape. The officers reacted instantly. "Stop. Hands where we can see them," one officer commanded. 2 suspects ran toward a parked car, but the officers were faster. They tackled one to the ground while another officer blocked the car's door before the second man could get in. The remaining 3 suspects tried to blend into the crowd, but with more security forces arriving, they had nowhere to go. Within seconds, all 5 were detained. A quick search revealed that they had been carrying small but powerful electronic devices, likely meant to interfere with communications or security systems. The team quickly realized the plan. If the attackers had succeeded, they would have blocked all emergency signals, creating chaos as the president left the venue. It would have left him vulnerable at the worst possible moment. But thanks to the CTSFO team's fast response, the plan had failed. Inside, President Zelenskyy finished his speech to a standing ovation. The audience had no idea how close they had come to witnessing a disaster. As the event ended, the CTSFO officers escorted him toward the convoy, now completely secured. They remained alert, scanning for any last-minute threats. The team had done it. They had stopped the attack before it could happen, ensuring the safety of not just the president, but everyone in attendance. But they knew their job was never truly over. There would always be new threats, new challenges, and new missions to face. As the convoy drove through the city streets, the CTSFO officers didn't celebrate. Instead, they stayed focused, watching every corner, every shadow, every passing car. Because in their line of work, danger was always just around the corner. Tonight, they had won. But tomorrow would bring another mission, and they would be ready.